It's just 7 o'clock by my watch, and I will call the meeting to order. So, first item on the agenda, of course, are the minutes. We had the minutes of September 15th, 2020. Is there a motion?
I'd move to approve the minutes of September 15th, 2020 with any amendments or additions thereto.
Is there a second?
Second.
And Ted seconds. Page 1.
Oh, one comment from me is that I don't know if the minutes should reflect that I was absent for part of the meeting.
It should, and because you were here, then left, and then you came back.
Exactly.
And I'm not exactly sure where.
I can check the tape and put in those time
Thank you.
signatures.
Yeah.
Good point.
Page 2. And page 3. Hearing no further corrections, then all those in favor of approving the minutes of September 15th, 2020, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. And we have 2 abstentions. Jeff is going to abstain, and so is Joy. This is a time for public comment. If anyone in the audience has any issues they'd like to bring up, either on the agenda or not, this is the time. Is there any indication, Eric, about that?
I just put a message in the chat window and we'll just give it a couple seconds here to see if anyone would like to make a public comment.
Okay.
I'm not seeing anyone, Terry.
Okay, thanks. Then we'll move on to interviews and appointments. If Terry Marin is on the internet or the Zoom, we can introduce her.
Terry, you should be
I see her
connected right now in just a moment.
Okay, so
Hi, welcome.
I think I'm there.
You're here. We can
Yes.
hear you too. So good. So welcome, and you're a candidate for the Conservation Commission. You've written a really well done piece for us. I call it a treatise, but, which leaves us with not too much to question, I think. But if you could just give a brief summary of what you've written so that people in the viewing audience can appreciate it as well.
Oh, okay. I applied for the position on the Conservation Committee, and I'm interested in helping preserve the wildlife and the wildlife corridors in town, protecting the watersheds in town, maintaining the rural character in Williston, through conserving lands in town through the easements or purchasing lands, and creating open space. And just I've been, working with, I was on the committee that originally researched the Catamount Community Forest and was involved with that for just about over a year. And I really enjoyed working with, the outdoor woods and forestry and the birds. And so I just really, I've been a citizen scientist for many years doing bird counts. I helped out on the bobolink project over at the Catamount Community Forest. I put up a series of bluebird boxes there to encourage nesting of bluebirds. And I've just been, over the years, different involved in citizen scientist projects with vernal pools and the bobolinks, whippoorwills. Enjoy being out in nature and sharing that with other folks. I've led walks. I took the Master Naturalist class in 2019, and I led a series of bird walks and nature walks on all the town parcels over a year. And yes, I really enjoy being involved, and I'd like to give back to the community now that I have an opportunity and I'm retired.
I think you froze up on us.
Oh dear. Oh, for how
Oh,
much?
no, you're okay. No, you're okay.
Okay.
It was just a couple of seconds.
Oh, good.
Well, thank you. And I turn it over to the board for questions that they may have. Anyone with questions?
Jeff here. Hey, Terry. My question has to do with one of the roles of the Conservation Commission is to review various types of plans that come before the town for development, such as subdivision. And sometimes the applicant may not see the value of the comments that the Conservation Commission is providing to the Planning Commission or the DRB as they go through their review of the development. And would like to hear your thoughts on how to deal with that situation where you may disagree with a developer, and what is the appropriate action the Conservation Commission should take?
Looking through, I know everybody has different ideas of how a community should be developed and things. And there's pretty precise rules and regulations in the town plan, in the DRB, that kind of, designate what can happen, percentages of open space or not. You try to work with the developer and try to see if there are some ways to negotiate, whatever issue that comes up, whether it be open space or, public pathways going through a development. So, just try to negotiate with the developer.
Okay, good, thank you. And then my second question is for some reason this over time has fallen on my shoulders to ask. So please note that I ask it of everyone or basically everyone who applies for a position on a town board or commission. And it's a conflict of interest question. And it's what would you do to recognize it? And what would you do about it, about a potential conflict of interest?
Just get the consensus of the group. There are, a group of members that work together and talk through situations and just listen to both sides and see if we could come to some kind of a compromise. But like I said, there are, rules and regulations set in place. So sometimes that's what you just have to go with and what the town plan says. So I think just, working as a group, I think is important.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Terry, this is Ted Kenny. I don't have a substantive question. I looked at your application and I'm very impressed with how active you are and the level of knowledge you have. So my non-substantive question is, it says that you were a postmaster. Where was that?
Oh, I was several different places. The nice thing about the post office is you can kind of move around. So I started off in Bradford, Vermont.
Oh,
And that was when I was clerking. That was for about 6 years. And then I became postmaster in Corinth, Vermont. I went to Fairleigh, Vermont. These are OIC's, officer in charge, to get experience. West Topsom, where East Thetford, I was postmaster there for
Wow.
several years. And then I transferred over to Ferrisburg.
Okay.
which was a nice,
Yeah.
small, really nice, small town, over on Lake Champlain.
Wow, that's
So,
quite the Vermont experience.
Yeah, I really enjoyed,
Yeah.
loved working with the public, and, I was always in a smaller office, so I had one-on-one contact with the customers and the residents.
wow. So my mom grew up in East Corinth.
Oh, yeah.
Went to high school in Bradford.
Ah, yes.
I
know it well.
spent a lot of time growing up on Lake Maury, so
Oh,
you're kind of in my neck of the woods there.
yes.
Or
yeah.
you,
I
yeah.
got to deliver a lot of express packages to the children at the camps during the summer.
yes, okay,
Yeah,
oh,
that was-
sure, yep.
yeah.
That's another thing. I was a counselor at a camp on Lake Fairleigh.
Barely. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful over there.
Oh, yes, it is. The bridge that goes over the Connecticut River in Fairleigh, that iron bridge,
Oh, yeah. Yes.
it is one of the prettiest, I think, in the state.
It is beautiful.
Any further questions? If not, I'd be looking for a motion.
I'd move to appoint Terry Marin to the Conservation Commission for an unexpired 4-year term through June 30th of 2022.
Second,
We have a motion made and seconded. Is there a discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have a unanimous vote. Congratulations. We look forward to
Yeah.
having you on the commission.
Well,
Thank you
thank you
so
very
much.
much. And I know I have a lot to learn, but I've been to several of the meetings since the first of the year. And it's just the amount of knowledge that's on the board is amazing. So I'm sure I'll have some good guidance along the way.
Good.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks for,
Congratulations, Terry.
Thank you. Okay, have a good evening.
thank you.
Please do.
So Green Mountain Transit Annual Update, folks are on the line.
Yep, I'm getting them connected right now, Terry. John.
So we have 3 folks tonight. We have John Moore, who's the General Manager of Green Mountain Transit, our representative and the alternate, Chapin Kaner, who's our representative, is Amy Brewer, who's our alternate to the Green Mountain Transit Board. So welcome all 3 of you. And John, I'll start off with you.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us. I'm John Moore, the General Manager at Green Mountain Transit. So I just want to provide a brief overview of Green Mountain Transit and some of the services that we provide to the town of Williston. Then afterwards, I'll be happy to answer any questions and take any suggestions that you folks may have on how we can provide better service to your residents. So with that, let me share my screen here quickly. Is that showing?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it does.
Great. So just a quick snapshot of who we are. Back in 1973, CCTA at the time became the state's first and to the state only transit authority. Back in 2016, we, CCTA at the time, and Green Mountain Transportation Agency, who was operating down in Montpelier and also up in the St. Albans area, we combined into one organization, and we were renamed the Green Mountain Transit Authority. All of our public kind of documentation and outreach, we go by Green Mountain Transit or GMT. So GMT, we provide service in a total of 6 counties throughout the state. So we are certainly the largest transit provider in the state of Vermont. We're directed by a 13-member board of commissioners. So, per the introduction, Chapin Kaner has been a longtime board member, very knowledgeable about our organization, past chair. And then Amy Brewer is the alternate representing Williston. In total, we have about 180 employees. We own over 160 revenue vehicles, and all said throughout our 6-county region, close to 1,000 bus stops. So in terms of a quick kind of financial overview, our total agency budget is about $21 million. Roughly 2/3 of that is in our urban operations in Chittenden County. And just quickly, in terms of a breakdown of our urban revenues, You'll see this is fiscal year 20 that ended on June 30th. Roughly 50% of our revenue came from the federal government. I will say that for fiscal year 20, this is a little bit skewed because we did receive some CARES Act federal funding. So our federal share is about 10% higher than typical, and our state and passenger revenue shares are about 5% lower than historical data. So about 50% from the federal government in FY20, 14% from the state of Vermont, 22% from our member municipalities through our assessments that we'll talk about in a few slides, and then 12% from the passenger fare revenue. So when someone boards the bus and pays us $1.50, that's about 12% of our overall revenue. We have been operating fare free since middle of March due to COVID. So that's a big reason that number is down. We're typically about 18% of our revenue comes from the actual fare box.
Okay.
So we do provide multiple types of service throughout our service area. So we operate the fixed route service, which is your typical city bus when you think of that. We operate multiple commuter routes, kind of connecting Burlington to some outlying areas, Montpelier, Middlebury, St. Albans, Jeffersonville, Milton, Heinsberg. So we've really grown our geographic kind of commuter service in the last decade or so. And then we also operate a variety of demand response service. So these are trips that are operated by GMT vehicles, but there's no set schedule. These are programs where people call in as needed based on eligibility and transportation need. So there's really three main demand response programs. The first one is the Americans with Disability Act. So that ADA is a federal requirement. Anytime you have fixed route service, from that fixed route service, there's a 3/4 of a mile bubble, if you will, that anyone that lives within that 3/4 of a mile zone is eligible for complimentary ADA service if they're eligible and unable to take the fixed route bus for medical or other reasons. There's also an Elders and Disabled program, and this operates very much like the ADA program. But this is for folks that live more than 3/4 of a mile away from a bus route. So they're not eligible for the ADA program based on where they live. But for example, in Williston, there's Williston Woods, and we have a large percentage of our Williston ridership, E&D is from that neighborhood. So, not near a bus route, but they still need transportation to social and, medical appointments, shopping. So that program provides that funding. And then we also operate through Medicaid, a non-emergency medical transportation contract. So that's for folks that are Medicaid eligible for medical trips. In Williston and Chittenden County, GMT contracts with the Special Services Transportation Agency, SSTA, to provide the ADA and E&D service. We provide that directly in our rural areas. And then SSTA is also the subcontractor for that Medicaid contract in Williston and Chittenden County. We also operate multiple weekly grocery shopping trips. So these are services that we provide to senior living complexes, low income housing developments, directly to the grocery store, free of charge to give people grocery store access. We do provide seasonal mountain service, both down in the Mad River Valley area where Sugar Bush Resort is, and then on the mountain road in Stowe, really to support the local economy, the tourism, and try to create some of the benefits that public transit can create even in those seasonal services. And then the other service that we are starting, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes, but micro transit. We're starting a pilot project this upcoming January in Montpelier. And I'll talk more about that, but we're excited about the potential of running that type of service in other areas, including applications like Williston. So just a quick snapshot of our overall ridership. So in fiscal year 19, we did about 2.9 million total rides. You'll see the vast majority of that was in our Chittenden County fixed route service. I'll mention that I did use FY19, not FY20. Just because we did experience, as you would expect, a large ridership decrease due to COVID. So FY20 was down about 22% overall from FY19. So certainly some pretty significant impact. So I presented FY19. And the other quick thing I'll mention is that while the majority of our trips are done on the fixed route, these much smaller ridership percentages, these programs, the E&D and the ADA and the Medicaid, really critical services getting people, in some cases, to dialysis and really some life-saving, activities. So those trips are typically, number one, a much longer distance than the trips taken on our fixed route buses. And number two, it's really a much more personalized service. So it's door to door. It's one, if not maybe a handful of people on the vehicle at once, just based on the scheduling constraints. And generally speaking, a much higher cost, but again, really critical service that those programs provide. So in terms of our fixed route service, you folks probably know this, but I'll just do a quick overview. So really two routes that fixed routes that serve Williston. The first is our red line. We did rename all of our routes a few years ago and color coded them. So previously this was named Williston, the number one route. But this is our second busiest route in our system. We operate about 50 fixed route routes in our service area. This was the second busiest, over 450,000 boardings in FY19. This route connects downtown Burlington out to Taft's Corners, stopping at, obviously major trip generators at the University of Vermont and also at the University Mall. And based on the ridership, definitely receives our best service levels that we have in our system. So this route operates 7 days a week. We operate every 20 minutes during rush hour on weekdays to try to make our service as convenient as possible. And we operate evening service until 11:40 p.m. on Monday through Saturday. We also operate our Orange Line, number 10 route, much lower ridership, about 19,000 boardings in FY19. I do also want to point out that we combined, and this was COVID related, but back in June, we did combine our Orange Line with our Essex Center Silver Line route. So now there are some benefits in terms of connections. So those two combined routes now kind of serve Taft Corners, via 2A to 5 Corners, up to the Essex outlets, and then down Sand Hill Road back to Williston. So that was mostly done due to ridership and also staffing availability. When the pandemic first hit, we did experience some driver shortages. So right now, the combined service is 6 days a week. We don't operate on Sunday for this route, but we do operate Monday through Saturday, and the bus runs every 75 minutes. One thing that we are analyzing and will continue to analyze as we go forward is if it's worth keeping these two routes combined. The benefit really is that there's more connections, so you can get from Williston up to the outlets without having to take a second bus, for example. One thing we'll want to look at as ridership starts to increase again, looking at ways we can run more buses. So, typically, if you run service that's, operates every hour or less, it's just not attractive enough to get people on the bus. So 75 minutes, while maybe appropriate during the pandemic, eventually we're going to want to look at maybe cutting that in half, and we have a bus every 45 minutes or every 30 minutes. But that's something that we'll keep an eye on as ridership demand increases as we get into the future. So in terms of the funding from the town of Williston, so there are a few different programs that the town does help support, and we're very thankful for that. So the first assessment is for the fixed route. So in FY21, the town paid about $198,000 to provide the local match for those two routes I just talked about. One thing I will point out is that was a 0% increase over FY20. We originally had a 4% increase budgeted for all of our member municipalities. And then of course, COVID hit, and we were fortunate enough to get some federal funding to help backfill some of our costs. So our board decided that it was appropriate to level fund all of our member municipalities in FY21. We will be presenting our FY22 budget in the coming months to our board, and then that will be finalized in December. At that time, we'll know what the FY22 assessment increases will be, and then we'll send Eric and his team that funding letter so you guys can work that into your budget. So in addition to the fixed rate assessment, and I'll quickly note that it does also include some capital funding match kind of built into that assessment to help pay for buses primarily. but there's also a ADA assessment. So again, we're required to provide that kind of zone of 3/4 of a mile. This gets a little complicated, but essentially what our charter says is that all of our member municipalities get a 50% discount off the total ADA costs. So essentially what we do is when we're building our budget for the next fiscal year, we project what the ADA cost will be. FY22 will be, like everything else, a little challenging due to COVID, just because, when elective surgeries and medical appointments and telehealth, that definitely, impacted the demand. That's slowly coming back, but to predict what the demand will be in, 8 months, very difficult to do. But what we will do is, as an agency, we'll project what the total FY22 cost will be. And then we will apply for all of our member municipalities what their actual ridership percentage was for the previous fiscal year. And then that is how we derive the assessment. So looking at the FY21 assessment, I'll just walk through this quickly on how we came up with that $24,504 assessment for Williston. So the total FY21 ADA program cost $1.34 million. There's that 50% discount. So the billable amount is $670,000 to our member municipalities. We then look at the actual ridership from the last completed fiscal year, which in FY21 would have been FY19. So for example, in FY19, there was just over 1,600 ADA rides in the town of Williston. That represented about 3.75% of the total ADA ridership. So we simply just apply that 3.74% to the total billable 50% discounted cost. And then that's how we came up with the $24,504 assessment. So again, we're just starting to develop the projected FY22 program costs, and there will be some COVID impacts. But we do know that Williston, their total share of ridership, stayed right around that 4% number. So we would anticipate a similar in the ballpark assessment for their ADA, your ADA costs in FY22. Again, we'll have all that finalized by December, so you guys can build that into your budgets as needed. And then lastly, there was that E&D service. So that's the Elders and Disabled program. So that's a federal grant that flows through VTrans, provides 80% of the operating costs. And then so we have partner organizations who act as the 20% local match providers. Williston's a great partner in that program, and they do provide a 20% local match. So in FY20, the town provided about $12,000 for that local match. And that allowed over 2,100 Williston resident rides through that program. So all said and done, just to recap, about 198,000 for the fixed route match, 24th. And I'm getting a message that my internet is unstable, so hopefully you can still hear me.
Yep, we can.
Yes.
Okay, good. And then lastly, before we open it up for questions, I just want to go through some of our future initiatives and projects that we're working on as an organization. So Williston kind of specific, we've dealt with the CCRPC and, the VTrans with the exit 12 park and ride. So, we have, that was designed so our buses can turn around in there. And once that's online, we'll definitely figure out a way to serve that. Frequency improvements. We did a next gen service plan a few years ago, looking at ways to improve our service and increase ridership. In Williston, frequency was definitely the number one thing identified. So going forward, we'll certainly look at making frequency improvements. Technology upgrades. This is something that we've tried to prioritize as an agency, trying to, stay up with the times and provide really passenger convenience and passenger tools that makes taking our services as easy as possible. So the first one that we rolled out about a year ago was a new bus tracking application for individual phones. So if you're at home or at your office and you're taking the bus, you can get real-time predictions when the bus will arrive. We've had a system like this in place since 2016, but for the first 3 years, it was a different vendor and it was a very unreliable system. This new vendor, they're great to work with, and we're actually doing a pilot project to increase the reliability of their program. But it's been a much better product for the public to use. As I mentioned, we're not charging fares currently, but we did roll out just before COVID a mobile ticketing app. So if you want to take the bus, you don't need to worry about having, $1.02. You can actually pay on your phone. You just show the phone to the driver. It's a cashless transaction. So we're excited about the benefits of that. And then with the bus tracking piece, the other benefit is there's a back end system. So every trip we operate, we have the actual scheduled data, and it allows our planning department to analyze that and make printed schedule changes, so we're as reliable as possible. So that's really a great benefit. The other technology piece we're working on are early stages, but we're partnering with T-Mobile to provide free Wi-Fi on all of our buses. That's a 2-year pilot project that we're hoping to have in place sometime around the start of the calendar year. So another passenger benefit, trying to make our services as attractive to folks as possible to incentivize people taking the bus. Microtransit. So this is the new service model. That's what we're working on in Montpelier. So we're starting a pilot project in January. And essentially what microtransit is, it's on-demand transit using app-based technology. So think of Uber or Lyft, but with a public transit vehicle. So this is something that VTrans is very supportive of. There's the city of Montpelier is extremely supportive of, and some community stakeholder groups have really pushed this project along. But essentially, we're replacing 3 routes in Montpelier that kind of operate on a fixed route, and they're not the greatest transit service. And starting in January, folks can go on their phone or give us a call and say, I'd like to be picked up at 10 a.m. and dropped off, at the hospital, and we'll schedule that. And it's kind of transit on individual schedule instead of the other way around, where individuals have to live their life around our schedule. So we're very excited about that. We also think there's a lot of potential to solve some of that first mile, last mile challenge that's created by transit. So, if you work, 3/4 of a mile off Williston Road, we'll get you 3/4 of a mile away, but then we can't get you the last 3/4 of a mile. A service like this could fill that gap, would meet you at the bus stop and then bring you that last 3/4 of a mile. And in a similar fashion, we think there could be a lot of applications in low density areas, i.e. Williston Village, where, we did try running fixed route service with a 40-foot bus, and the density wasn't there, but there's certainly demand for those services. So, we would envision a situation where, somebody in Williston Village, would, contact the microtransit through the app. The bus would pick them up. It would bring them to Taft Corners. They'd have a seamless transition onto another bus that would bring them into downtown. So it's really providing that geographic coverage in a convenient and cost-effective way where, again, maybe a 40-foot transit bus is not appropriate, but there's still certainly demand that we want to meet as effectively as possible. We're also working on a transit strategic plan. That's essentially a 10 to 15-year planning document for the agency, kind of prioritizing investment over the next 10 or 15 years and spelling out, what we want to achieve, how we want to improve our services. And there'll be a very strong focus on public outreach through that process. So there'll be more to come on that. We are developing a fleet replacement plan. This is a very high priority for me. Besides our labor cost, our maintenance budget is certainly our highest cost pressure, largely because we have a very old bus fleet in our urban service, especially. So in the last 3 years, we've ordered 17 new buses and received 17 new buses in our Chittenden County operation. We have 5 more on order or budgeted. So in the last 3 years, we'll have turned over 33% of our fleet. Obviously, the newer the vehicle, the less maintenance costs, the longer or the more warranty coverage you have. So that's really a good way to reduce our cost pressures. The other benefit is when you buy a bus, the federal government provides 80% of the funding. When you fix a bus, they only provide 50%. So the more we can invest in the capital program, the less our operating costs are on the back end. So that's a real priority for me as we move forward. And then with that is fleet electrification, buying electric buses. We do have 2 zero emission buses in service in Burlington. So we've had those in service since about February. We've had some minor issues with certain things, but the state of Vermont, VTrans, has a pretty robust program trying to buy electric buses for different geographic service areas, different operating environments, different bus manufacturers. So really all the transit properties in the state can kind of analyze what's going to be the best fit for the long-term implementation, because there's certainly a lot of benefits to the electric vehicles in terms of emissions, obviously, but it's also, there's a lot of potential and cost savings over the life of the vehicle. But we just need to kind of balance that with the upfront capital investment, and then the reliability of the buses to make sure that they can have the mileage range that we need to meet our service demands. We're also working on a public transit safety plan. This is a new Federal Transit Administration requirement, but we're very excited about this. A very interactive policy with all employees in the organization. So we're excited about the potential really to increase the safety culture of our organization. So that we'll have in place by January, but we're very excited about the promise of that. And then lastly, just point out, we've spent a lot of resources on the COVID response. We've put a lot of safety protocols into place to protect our employees and our passengers. We'll certainly continue to do that. One of the things we've done to protect our bus drivers is to go zero fare, as I mentioned. So that does allow all of our passengers to board in the rear door of the bus to keep that 6 feet separation where we can. And then with that zero fare, there's certainly other local and state support to continue that, post-COVID. There were some initial conversations before COVID about providing zero fare service. So our board will be discussing that and looking at the feasibility of it, revenue replacement. It would certainly increase ridership and, provide a lot of community benefit. And we just want to look at ways that we can make that a reality while not having to cut service. We wouldn't want to get a counterproductive situation where we go fare free, but to do it, we need to cut 30% of our services. But that's something that we'll be looking at post COVID of ways of providing that community benefit if possible. So that's what I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions. This is a picture of one of our new electric buses. Hopefully you've seen it in Williston. It does operate the red line quite a bit.
Thank you, John. Are there questions from the board? Perhaps you could take the screen down.
No, my only question really had to do with Jeff Ferris here with COVID, but you pretty much addressed that. And it sounds like some of the word is incentive, but the federal funding was increased to cover the loss of revenue because of COVID.
Correct. Yeah. So we
Yeah,
received
so-
we received money so we could backfill those fares.
Yeah.
Any other
Great.
questions from board members? Jeff, Chapin or Amy, anything to add?
I would add a little bit. First of all, I want to congratulate John Moore. He wound up becoming general manager at a difficult time, and then COVID hit at the same time. And he's held a steady hand on the tiller and is doing a great job. I also wanted to say, as a result of COVID, we have been fare free primarily so that people can board from the back of the bus and reduce the risk to the operators. Not in order to get more people on, but we see some of its advantages, such as the fact that the boarding happens faster, there's less interaction with the operator because there's no discussion of fares, et cetera, et cetera. And so we do want to take a look at that going forward because of some other initiatives that have been coming our way. Before this, though, we had budget problems, and I want to be really clear about that. Public transit is a regional service. We don't have any buses from GMT that run within Williston. It's a regional service, and what do you do? What would we do if South Burlington weren't willing to contribute to the red line? We're sort of depending on each other one at a time, and it really should be regionally funded or some other way funded. And I just want to make that point, that we don't have the right funding mechanism for public transit at the moment, and we're going to have to deal with that somehow. We, in fact, and because of the budget, had to do a little bit of trimming of routes and also raised fares prior to COVID. And I also wanted to talk about the long term, which is that if we want to encourage public transit, we need to deal with that last mile piece that John was talking about, that micro transit helps with. And I've been working with the planning office. As you may know, we've had citizen committees working on the official map and on mobility transfers, and also on programming for transit. That COVID kind of slowed that part of it down. But at some point, you have to realize we have buses already taking students to school. Our new hotels may want to have shuttle buses going to the airport and to the train station. And we ought to try to look at this holistically. What are the transit needs in the town? And also tying in with the energy plan, are there people who would not drive a car if they had better access to public transportation? And so I think we should look at that, and we should probably consider having a transit center at Taft Corners area as part of that implementation, so that there's an easy way for people who are in a feeder system getting a short ride, even just being dropped off by a neighbor, to get to and wait appropriately for the trunk routes. I also wanted to just point out that we are going to be renegotiating a labor contract. We have a 5-year labor contract with our primary unions, and actually with all the unions, they come up this year. So that will be going on. And the Amy Brewer has been a very active alternate for me, and she has been on the finance committee and is very much in the know of what's going on. And so I feel as though Williston has good connection.
Thank you. Any further questions or last questions from the board?
I'd just say, Chapin and Amy, thank you for representing the town as you do. And John, thanks for your service. I did want to point out a horrible, egregious thing that I noticed on the slide that says ridership. The word third is misspelled. So
We will fix that. Nice.
I couldn't listen to the rest of the presentation.
I thought you were going with Williston needs to withdraw because of that.
Well, if I see other things like that. Yeah. Thank you.
I'll try to be real brief. Chapin, you brought up the way we fund transit isn't working. So what does that mean?
It's tenuous.
Okay, what I was more getting at is, what does that mean in terms of moving forward? And this is an open question, anybody can chime in, but are there efforts being made to come up with a more appropriate funding, I don't know what the right word is, scenario?
Well, the legislature did a study a few years ago and looked at all the different ways to fund it, from things related to license plates and other sources of income. And they are people in the legislature are actively looking for this. And Kurt McCormick, who is a representative from Burlington, who chairs the Transportation Committee in the House, is an advocate for fare free if at all possible. He doesn't even own a car. He uses public transportation exclusively. So I feel as though there are people working at it from the legislative angle, but we have not yet cracked that nut.
Okay. John or Amy?
Yeah, I would just echo Chapin. There is kind of a baseline study that was done back in 2015 or 16, but it laid out the options, but not the implementation of any of the options. So that will be something that's included in our strategic plan. But really, property tax funding of transit is not sustainable in terms of the growth of the system.
And I think there's a thing about take, for example, the hospital. What it costs for them to provide a parking space to their employees is a lot. The parking spaces are not cheap for them, and their employees who don't have the expensive ones have to take a shuttle bus from wherever they park, over at the Fanny or at the gymnasium. And so for an organization like that to actually fund public transit so that they don't need to build more parking spaces, or if you think about it, if you have an intersection that doesn't need a $500,000 upgrade because fewer people are in their car, there is a certain amount of money going into transportation. And the question is, how is that allocated?
I was going to add the same thing. That's kind of a long-term, slow transition. But as we move slightly from a less transportation car kind of culture and move towards walking and biking and transit, which is what the Williston Mobility Group is really looking at, since we have some of the infrastructure that could make that work. As we move that culture, you can find ways to move that funding, but there isn't a magic formula outlined yet.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thanks, all three of you, for being here tonight and giving us the lowdown on the GMT. And we appreciate Chapin and Amy being our representatives through the board. So thank you, and we will move along to our next subject. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
So we have the opportunity to introduce our new fire chief, Aaron Collette. I hope that he is on the line.
Yep, I'm getting connected right now, Terry, and it's my pleasure to introduce the third fire chief in the history of Williston Fire Department, Aaron Collette. It's his 4th week here on the job, and really fortunate to have him. And he's going to share his experience and initial impressions and vision for you tonight, and take any questions you have. So turn it over to Aaron.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Welcome,
much,
Chief.
Eric.
Welcome.
Thanks, Terry. Good to see you again. Nice to meet you all, virtually or otherwise. And thanks for your patience as we work through this pandemic. Crazy times. And nobody, I'll say this, I didn't expect 25 years ago when I joined the fire service to be retire from the fire service in the midst of a pandemic, and certainly not to be hired as a fire chief in the middle of one as well. So that being said, thank you for the opportunity to allow me to serve as the chief of your fire department. It's been a great couple of weeks here, approaching the middle of the 4th week, and I continue to learn every day. So I'd love to take a moment just to share a little bit about where I am and where I've come from before joining your community. I started as a volunteer in the city of Virgins, where my father and grandfather served on the fire department there. My dad continues to serve at 79 years old with over 57 years of service. So to say that I grew up in the fire service, it's true. My mom, my father was on, and my mother was on for a short time in the Virgins department as well. My grandfather, who's since passed along, served as the, to our knowledge, the longest continuing service fire chief in the state of Vermont in the history of the state, with over 55 years.
Wow.
Did I ever think that I was going to do that? Absolutely not. I'll share with you today, I have no intention to be 100 years old and serving as your fire chief. That won't be who I am. But I've been truly blessed in my career, where I had great mentorship in that Virgins department at an early age. They actually evolved a cadet firefighter program for the volunteers. Times were a little bit easier back then, a little bit easier to get people in the department. They were a little bit less stringent for oversight and liability and insurances that follow that. So we got away with a lot of things back then that we probably couldn't get away with today. I went on after graduation from high school and went and got my associate's degree in fire science in Laconia, New Hampshire. I had served over in the Lakes region for a couple of years on a combination department in Guilford Fire Rescue. Attained my EMT basic over there as a National Registry EMT. Came out of the Lakes region and was tested for the position in Burlington Fire Department. So at a young age, got hired into the Burlington Fire Department just shortly after I graduated from college with my associate's degree. Burlington Fire has been my life for the last 25 years, where I served in every rank except for the chief of department. Started when we had a single ambulance there. We had a minimum staffing of 18 folks, and you could see the city is getting ready within the next couple of months to put the third ambulance on and increase staffing to 22 people. I had a lot of great street experiences in Burlington. I think I learned a lot from the streets in Burlington, a lot from the people, a lot from the mentors that I served under there as well. In addition to my roles in Burlington, I have been active in the State Fire Academy, where I've been a lead fire instructor for the academy for over 25 years. I continue to teach for them and do special projects for them, including as recent as this last Saturday, I went down and I'd done some work for them to build some new 3-dimensional live fire props for our live fire training facility down at the academy. I also am active in the state urban search and rescue team. In that capacity, I serve as the rescue team manager. That's a team that's evolved from about an 11 department group, where each department would commit a level of personnel to the mission of urban search and rescue. And within that mission is structural collapse rescue, confined space, swift water, rope rescue, and other technical rescue aspects where local jurisdictions may not have the technical expertise or certainly not the high-end expensive equipment that is required in that discipline. So the state has actually built that out. That is now joined under a state division where we work under the Division of Fire Safety. I've seen and been active on many deployments across the state, including one out of state where we served Hurricane Florence and had a great eye-opening experience down in the Carolinas during that hurricane, where we actually were there ahead of the hurricane. We stayed in a fire station with over 100-mile-an-hour winds, hoping that the roof wouldn't blow off. And over the days that followed, we did a large number of rescues. I think the state of Vermont Urban Search and Rescue Team did the highest per capita number of rescues out of the entire FEMA system while we were down there, with over about, I think we did like 43 evacuations or rescues. So a little bit about transitioning back to my activities in Burlington. As I said, I served in every capacity except for the fire chief. So as a lieutenant of Engine Company 1, which is in the city's downtown, where we were running over 2,000 runs a year. I tried to pride myself in putting myself in busy companies and learning not only my job, but the job of mentoring and developing my firefighters and fire officers that followed me. And those people I'm proud today to say are serving in that capacity as I have left the organization. And it's been, it warms my heart to see the success that has followed, that's for sure. My latest assignment in Burlington prior to my retirement was the Deputy Chief of Operations. And essentially what I did then was develop policy for how we delivered the services that we delivered to the community in the street. So it was standard operating guidelines, which would then be taught through the training division. I supervised the training division. The training division would then run out policy and educate our firefighters on the safe manners of the outlines of that were contained within the operational guidelines. But those were done through collaboration, work within labor, where we had a very active bargaining unit through the IAFF. I enjoyed that responsibility, but ultimately I come to being eligible for retirement, and lucky for me, the opportunity to serve as your fire chief opened up and I applied for the position. So that's where I'm at.
Well, thanks for the update. And I know that you've had a busy month because there's been at least a couple of fires that we responded to. And so tell us a little bit about your vision of what the fire department should look like in the next couple of years.
Yeah, sure. I'll start by saying this is I'm very impressed with the staff. We have a dedicated staff. The group of firefighters and fire officers that I've worked with for the last 3.5 weeks, they impressed me a lot. There's a lot of depth there. They are self-motivated. They are go-getters. I think Chief Morton has left a strong legacy where the division of labor is divided amongst the staff in a lot of great equal parts. And I see the team pulling together for the common good. I think that has a lot of merit for us. I will say this is that I've set aside time and over the last couple of weeks, each week to have the tenured members of the department take me around the community and show me some of the risk and the liability, the potential that we have as it relates to property protection, but also life safety. And I think my eyes have been opened in the last 3.5 weeks at the potential for the town of Williston. And I think, Terry, you bring up a good point. You know, the fire at Vermont Commercial Warehouse, while that fire was in an outbuilding that actually housed the sprinkler, the fire safety sprinkler, if it had been in that building, you know, we don't have a chance against that without a sprinkler system. So we're potentially outgunned in a lot of things with the current resources that we have. So, I mean, as Eric knows, I'm was a numbers guy in Burlington. I enjoy looking at data and having data decisions that are driven by data. And some of the things that I've looked at so far is that we have some opportunities for organizational growth as it relates to staffing. I've run some quick numbers from July 1 of 2019 till October 1st, 2,517 incidents. The average number of responders over that 2,517 incidents is three people, which is the minimum staffing by contract. So I tried to isolate that to pull out what the numbers look like for structural fires. And we averaged 5.9 people, including the folks that serve as dispatch on structural fires. So we'll need to work on that. The good news is that we've had 5 new applicants for the call staff, but they need to be trained. So we've enrolled them in the State of Vermont Fire Service Training Council's Firefighter 1 program through the State Fire Academy. But that will take us until about May of 21 to have those people completely trained. So until then, we continue to try to encourage the staff that are there, that are call staff, to respond to emergencies. We've developed some things already operationally to try to increase that participation. And we continue to work on it every day. I'm excited about the opportunities that we do have. I think that the group is eager and they have a thirst for that. And I'm happy to support them in that, in moving things, some simple things ahead that may help increase our participation. Part of my initial 3.5 weeks here is I've met with the majority of the neighboring fire chiefs, which we share a community border. I have 2 left to do, but I've hit Heinsberg, South Burlington, Essex Junction. So far, I need to meet with the folks out of Richmond and Essex Town, but they all understand our current situation, the risks that we're in, and have agreed to provide mutual aid until we can get that staffing built up. So we're working on it. We're trying to advance that and hope to have a better staffing model in the future.
Thank you very much. Other questions from folks?
Chief, hi, Jeff Ferris here.
Hi, Jeff.
You mentioned organizational growth, and
Absolutely.
should I interpret that as meaning you see there is the need for new staff, let's say in the near future?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Okay.
But I'll also say this is that there are other things that we could do within the department to try to increase our efficiency. There's other things that I've seen as direct as it relates to fire risk, and I've talked to Eric about this already, but just to try to evolve some of the services that we do as it relates to community risk reduction. So
Okay, good.
I'd hate to speak prematurely on that, but I think it's a direction I'd like to head.
Well, good. Well, thank you for the heads up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's helpful. Then my other question is more equipment related. And one of the things that I think sometimes select boards have trouble with is how darn much that equipment cost.
Absolutely.
And so my question is along the lines of equipment. And are you I know that Chief Morton had a schedule for, when new equipment would come online. That schedule has changed over time as I guess the equipment availability or the technology has changed. So I'm wondering if you're seeing a change to, what has been laid out to us in primarily in past budgets.
I would say this is that we are on a good track for equipment. I think that Chief Morton has developed a sound, logical system that I'll have to learn a little bit more about the history of that system so far. But I'll say this, we can have all the equipment that we need or would like, but without the people, we can't do the mission.
Fair enough.
We need to put people on fire trucks or people in ambulances to serve the community. So that's where I need to focus energy right now is people. We have the new trucks on order that are going to meet a gap for us. And we'll go from there. There are some things that I'm learning about maintenance and upkeep and of current apparatus that may influence that in the cycle that Chief Morton has out. But I'll say this, I don't anticipate it to be something dramatic.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions for the chief? Seeing none, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us tonight, and I look forward to a great relationship.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chief.
So we'll move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is the Black Lives Matter message installation request. And Eric will introduce the person who's going to do the presentation.
Yeah, the board has before it tonight a request and proposal for a social justice initiative from a group of residents in town, and I'm connecting Pat Brown, who's going to present the request to the board for discussion this evening. So I can see you, Pat. So I'll get you all connected.
Welcome, Pat. You're muted. You're muted, Pat. There you
How about
go.
that? Does that
That's
work?
good. Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we sent a document along, and we'll give you a little bit of history. And I want to thank you all for your time tonight. Looks like you've got a very busy agenda. So I think sometime in summertime, somebody posted on Front Porch Forum, Caitlin did, and sort of said, so all this stuff is going on around the country related to issues related to specifically police brutality, and there clearly was Breonna Taylor, and there's George Floyd, and even just today on the news I saw about a Jonathan Price who was shot down in Texas. And we started some conversations. Would have been great to do it in person, but we ended up sort of doing it online as you all are doing your business now. And it's been a group of probably 10, 12, 13 people that's sort of grown and come back. And I would say that the first part was getting to know each other. The second part was, we wanted to have Williston do something like put up a Black Lives Matter flag. And we had a lot of conversations around that, and still think it's important for the town to have some kind of significant message that's there. But we also began to talk about putting up a flag doesn't necessarily begin to really address the issues that we might have in our community. And so in the message that we sent you all, we tried to identify what some of those things are as possible directions that we could work on. So this is a request to you all, trying to say, what can we do in Williston? I'll say officially with under the rubric that you all have, and you have quite a bit, either a flag or Burlington painted the road. They painted the road in Montpelier, but also looking at the fact that you have a significant staff who are part of Williston. And what do they get? What do they get for training? What do department heads get for training? And we've had some of us have individual conversations with the police department and getting to know sort of what they do and the breadth and depth that they go through to hire people and train folks, and trying to look at that piece. But we're also sort of looking broader and sort of looking at the community and don't know how we're trying to figure out sort of the landscape and how we sort of address things like like the library, and do people feel welcome at the library? And what about all the businesses in Burlington? I mean, in Williston, we have a lot of people who come to Williston to shop. I know that you all may have seen the Stephanie Seguino study, which has some, Eric and I have had some conversations around that, and it's got some nuances, and the police are looking at some other data. But clearly there's a lot of information there, and we're trying to sort of pose a question of where can we go from here? And part of it is stepping back and saying the foundation of our town, which is in some of the values that are listed on the website, how do we manifest those in real life? And so we're sort of wanting to start a conversation with you all, not commit and say, we're demanding this or demanding that. We feel like we should be doing something in Williston. We don't have a lot of issues that we see, but again, I'm looking at those issues as a white, old man. And it's just different for other people. So that's sort of what we have. And there's clearly some bullet points on the document that we sent forward that are possible directions to begin to work in. So that's sort of we wanted to engage in a conversation to begin working together to figure out what we can do. I think there's some other people on the group. If you've got questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And some of them may be able to click on to answer some of your questions as well.
Good, thank you. So you have a decent sized group that has worked on this. I wondered, in part of your recommendations are to get people of color involved in the town. And I wondered, were you able to do that with your committee?
That's one of our goals currently. We are an all white committee, and as you know, the population of people of color in Williston is relatively small. So the people who came together for the initial front porch forum, so does anybody want to be part of this conversation, ended up being all white folks. And as we have sort of figured out what we are doing as a group, we are beginning to say, how do we begin to build our group from a coalition? So Terry, that's part of our goal as we're looking ahead for the next probably month, 6 weeks.
Good, thanks. I think that nobody can deny that there is racism in the country, in the state, and probably in town as well. I go back to education is a lot of the things that we'd be looking at, I believe, to educate people about what is what are the differences in folks and diversity. And I think back to an old film, South Pacific, that there was a lady who sang a song that says, you have to be taught to hate before it's too late, before you're 6 or 7 or 8. And I think part of our things will be to help to educate folks in town. That's my thought. Other thoughts? No other questions, no other thoughts?
No, that's, I don't think that's the case.
I just want to say thanks for taking this on. I recently, the sign behind me says Kenny Law Offices, but I'm actually not in private practice anymore. I'm working in the Attorney General's office, and we recently had a 21-day equity challenge that was an educational forum that one assistant attorney general, or maybe actually more like 2 or 3, would prepare a presentation based on readings that the American Bar Association had recommended. And I'll be honest with you, I generally don't like stuff like that. And, you know, we can debate the racial and psychological reasons inside my head why that would be. I don't deny any of them. But this was very beneficial. It was not feel good, pie in the sky, finger pointing. There were some hard topics to take, but it did open my mind up to the fact that this kind of educational effort is not, if it's done correctly, is very helpful and actually does move the ball forward in, in the case of my experience in individual employees in the Attorney General's office. And it really, it kind of did open my eyes up. Now that being said, I unfortunately don't have much more wisdom than that to offer. And I'm not quite sure where to take this, where to take an action step on it. But it is an important conversation to begin. And I just wanted to say thank you for beginning it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Pat.
And I'll also say that it's a journey for all of us. I mean, I grew up in South Florida, and where we had water fountains for coloreds and water fountains for whites, and I'm not that old. I worked at UVM. I retired from there, and I put up the Black Lives Matter flag 4 years ago. And the power, even though the flag doesn't solve the problems, the power of something that says these folks, in this case, Black lives, that have been sort of impacted in a negative way for so long actually matter, is way more powerful than I would have ever imagined. So it's Ted, I think part of it's learning and trying to have the conversations, which are incredibly hard. But another part of it for me, which again, I think we want to begin a conversation with you all, is to, what can we do in town that's under the auspices of the town, that would send a message that may help begin a conversation. And it's hard. So this journey is, for all of us, is really, 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 really difficult, particularly in an incredibly white state, particularly in a really white community, in a very white state. Yeah, I just wanted to say that in there too.
So Pat, Jeff Ferris here.
Yep.
Pretty much echoing what Ted said. I'll try not to repeat. First of all, thank you. The same thing with this issue is, to me, so hard to get my hands around that it almost kind of gives me a headache. I too don't know where to start. I don't know how to face my own racism. This is all raised questions that I'm really struggling to answer. You started to answer one of the questions that I had about the concept of a Black Lives Matter flag. And so I might ask you to expand a little bit more.
Sure.
And my question was along the lines of, that's the easy step. We can get a flag, we can raise it, paint the road, whatever it is. But the hard steps are the things you start to talk about in your letter. How do we start to change our community? If in fact it needs changing, which I believe it does. And so my question is along the lines of, what is the potential that will raise the flag, and then this we did what we've done something. Now we can relax, when in fact we really can't relax. It's the more difficult things we have to start to tackle.
And I think for me, and I can't speak for the group, but I'll speak for myself. I think that's all part of the journey, and we all have it. That's why we added the other bullet points there. So what do any of us have within our control that we can use to begin to expand the wisdom of the community? I'm an educator. I've taught in the classrooms. I taught outside the classrooms with students and student leaders. So how can we begin to use that? And you all have some authority over town employees. So I could look at that as one power dimension. So what happens in the world of Williston employees in a professional development or staff development kind of way? And I don't know. But if there's something that's going on, could some of that include looking at people's identities and the impact that their identities have as they go through their day? So that's one step, Jeff, that I could look at and say, well, you all have some ability to do that. It gets back to what I think Ted was talking about. Who's doing the educating, and what's the education look like, and who's the people being educated? Having taught classes looking at issues around race with 30 students in the classroom and one student happens to be a student of color, creates a different dynamic than when it's all students of color, right? So there's not one particular way to respond to it. It's sort of, we need to, begin taking some steps. For me, beyond a flag or painting the road, is what are some of those steps we could take as a town, and begin moving forward. It'll never, I'm an optimist that we can move forward. I also am a realist in knowing that because of the education part that we all have lived through, it's going to take a really long time to get to the point where we want to be. So I guess that's part of what we wanted to do, is sort of put the information out there to you all and have you individually or collectively think about it. And then come back. Sometimes I think in the letter we identified a date, November 17th, and sort of come back in and sort of say, so what is possible to begin moving forward, either something that is sort of static, and I don't know what the schools are. I know that both of our elementary schools in town and CVU all put up a Black Lives Matter flag late fall, late spring, or early summer. I don't know if they've done anything with their schools, and that's another piece that I can look at to begin to say, all of those students in those 3 different schools, clearly the 2 elementary schools are all connected directly to Williston. So what are they learning around that? Is the Black Lives Matter flag just there? So I think that there's a collection of things that could happen, and I don't want to go on and on and on because you got a budget stuff to talk about tonight. But I do think that there's some strategic initiatives, I guess I would say, that could happen in the next 6 months or a year that would go beyond just putting a flag up.
And then to repeat something I believe you said in the very beginning, is the concept of the flag. You still think that's important, not the concept raising a flag.
I think something that begins to have the conversation, and I say that because when the flag went up at UVM, it was 4 years ago. We were the first school in the country to put a flag up. It was hard. I mean, I had death threats. I had all kinds of stuff happening to me because I was the one who sort of made that happen. And if I had an opportunity to engage in conversation, I tried to do that, to try to figure out where people were coming from themselves. But I think it puts up a public notification that the town of Williston is interested in starting the journey and starting to do some of the work that needs to be done to move to a community that sort of lives up to some of the values that are on the webpage, that really looks at social justice and look at community and how can we continue to develop that as best we can.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Other comments? It sounds, obviously tonight we need to move on and we're probably not going to make a decision on a flag raising tonight, but I think in the near future we will. It seems to me like we need to start to develop a plan, as you've mentioned, Pat, that would encompass a lot of things, including education of our staff. The select board really has the only ability we have for our staff is to work with the town manager, who reports to us, and all the other staff report to their department heads and eventually to the town manager. So I think if we start the process of a short-term and long-term plan as to what we would like to have in Williston.
Yeah, I think we just want to start to have the conversation. And I think you all as a select board, I continue, even though I'm not working anymore at UVM, but it's like, so how do I continue to educate myself? What books am I choosing to read, or what book am I going to go back to reread? Because there's some books I've read over time that were incredibly insightful 5 years ago. And I've changed and the world has changed in 5 years. So I think that I put out there, Terry, on top of the employees would be for you all to sort of think about, what collectively could you all participate in? Ted, sounds like you've had some experience at the Attorney General's office to help expand and have you be part of the conversation as well.
If I could add too, as town manager, I've been thinking a lot about this lately as well, and my colleagues around Chittenden County and other organizations, and thinking about the training aspect for staff and what ways can we look at that and look for education and dialogue. And it's certainly something I've been thinking a lot about on a personal level as well. And it's to the conversation this evening, it's something really to think about from a management perspective of staff and thinking about what that training looks like. So another thing I've done recently is I started some conversations with other organizations in town to look at partnering for having spaces for dialogue, conversation, education, as really looking at a community level and what can we do as a community to have these conversations. So the beginning stage there, but I appreciate our conversations, Pat, and with other folks to talk about this topic, and appreciate work that's been done to bring it up to town staff and the select board here.
So thanks, Pat,
Okay.
for bringing this forward to us and your committee, and we look forward to working with you and your group and others in the community to start moving forward.
Okay. And I'll put it out there. If you all want to communicate via email, feel free to do that. Eric's got my email, and I'd be happy to engage in any kind of dialogue. And I know the people who are part of our group would be happy to do that too, is to try to figure out what we can do to give you more information before we move deeper into November, and figure out what some logical steps would be.
Good, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
So let's move on to the fiscal 21 budget update. And that'll be Eric and Shirley. And Shirley, I presume, will join us soon.
Yep, getting her connected here, Terry. I'll move you back to an attendee here, Pat. Let me do that. There we go.
Shirley?
Hello. I was going to just add one comment to Pat's conversation, actually. We are working with Karen Stackpole, Paul Franken Collins, and started a year ago, and then the pandemic hit and we had to cancel it. And we were starting with like the harassment in the workplace, sort of the typical training. Mm-hmm. But as we were talking with Karen, we said, well, let's really sort of change the conversation, and we have to keep those implements, but also talking about implicit bias. Mm-hmm. So that training actually happened last week, and there's a second one happening this week. And it's more for just working with each other, but working with the community as a whole, because so many town folks do work with the public every day. So on a very small level, we're starting to have that conversation with town employees, and we have about 85% attendance of our employees, of our full-time employees, and our permanent part-time employees. So we are having excellent attendance and wonderful reviews of the first half, or the first session. And instead of calling it, I have to turn my phone back on, instead of calling it harassment in the workplace, bear with me for 1 second, we're calling it creative and respectful and inclusive workplace environment, to talk about the bigger issues and not just harassment. So, so that's a small start.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Karen's a great trainer. I've been in numerous training sessions with her in the legislature.
She's wonderful.
Yep. I've heard her name before.
Yes.
All right. Pat, I was trying to move you back to an attendee without disconnecting you.
It's I'll just hit the leave button, and I'll wish you all good night.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll be in touch really soon.
Thanks, Pat.
All right.
Zoom has an update and I haven't figured it out yet.
Good luck with the numbers here tonight. Bye-bye.
So thanks everyone. Let's get to my notes here. And I recognize we gave you a lot in the packet this week as we dove into the numbers, and Shirley really took the lead on that for us the last month or so. I just wanted to start by saying, as we look at FY21 and looking at it as the town's fiscal policy plan, we're in a different time right now. We have a changed set of variables on the revenue side. when this budget was adopted. Shirley's going to provide those in more detail tonight. But we're looking to present to you tonight a revised spending plan based on the revenue projections. Granted, this could change as we move forward. Our thought is we can bring the board updates probably quarterly as we reevaluate the revenue forecast with our spending. But I want to be mindful of bringing to the board's attention and the community's attention moving ahead, just how we proceed as we project moving forward. So you'll see we've identified some expenses to put on hold for the most part to get the board's feedback this evening. And then as we look at how things go this year, there's a possibility we could add those expenses back in, but we want to take a close look at our revenue picture throughout the year. But I think I'll turn over to Shirley at this point to kind of highlight some of the numbers in more detail, but really want to leave this time for the board to ask questions as well. So I'll turn over to Shirley.
Okay, Eric put me the pressure on to talk fast, but seriously, on the second page on note number 3, I just want to tell you that the second line has 17 approved uniform, and that should be 15. I'm not including the lieutenant and the chief in that, so we have 15 approved positions, and we only budgeted 14. So I just wanted that to be clear. So I'm just going to jump to the pages 4 and 5 of this presentation, and I'm going to talk from them, and if you want to sort of follow along. But so the first column, so I'm looking at the revenue page, and the first column says, okay, our original budget was $11,671,000. That's where we started, and our expenses the expenses and revenue equal each other. So we worked with all the departments to get their best estimate of how their revenue would change because of COVID. That amounts to $560,000 decrease, leaving us a new revenue total of $11,111,000. So just to talk about a couple of the larger revenue decreases. So I'm looking at the local options tax. Not having a lot of history there to go on with issues like this happening, we had to just look at the last quarter, and particularly at the rooms and meals piece. And the rooms and meals piece actual received was 50% of what we budgeted. So we applied that 50% to the FY21 budget, cutting revenue $196,000. Like I said, the only point of reference we had was our fourth quarter of 2020. Because we know, the summer months aren't going to be busy. We're not going to have tourists traveling either in the summer, the fall, no big events going on at colleges this fall that bring a lot of people staying in the area, spending money in the area. So our gut said, okay, a 50% cut to our sales and use seems reasonable. Recording of legal documents, at least that's some favorable news. That is a $95,000 increase, and that is the volume of recording that has been going on, and it's the per page charge went up last year. So that's where that $95,000 is coming from. Passport revenue, of course, we have been shut down since the beginning of the fiscal year, and at this point there is no plan to restart that process. And even if we do, that would be Sarah Mason, and she's not even sure at what level we would bring that back at. So at this point, we're conservative, and we just said, let's take that revenue right off the chopping block. And then I'm gonna, there's several lines for the rec program camps, but so those all combined are 160,000 of revenue loss. You will see that there's 198,000 of expense reduction as well. And that, of course, is just COVID, fewer kids, smaller camps. And the last larger item is interest income. We cut that by 75,000 because the rates are just so awful, and they are not projected to turn around anytime soon. So then we had been talking with department heads, and so we knew of some expense changes. Some of them they're just known changes, and so we're really not asking for you to do anything, but there are some, especially the capital ones, that we are looking for you to give us direction with, that you're okay with what we're coming up with, because these are things that we feel like we can do to bring the expenses in line with the revenue. So the fire salary is just because we haven't filled the deputy chief, but the chief is expecting to fill that in January. So that'll be empty for 6 months. The recreation, again, that's just the savings from not having all the camps and the programs. The professional services, that was the parks needs assessment, which Todd has very nicely, very generously given up. But he and Eric and I met today in regards to the FY22 capital plan for Parks and Recs. And we're now talking about changing that to a scoping study instead. So that's also a reason to sort of take that off the board until we figure out exactly what we want to do there. In the budget was $9,000 of, in the capital budget, of building security measures, and you know, chatted with Eric and he's fine deferring that for right now. And we're only looking at the capital projects that either were funded with fund balance or operating budget, because those are the things that we need to preserve right now. The capital projects funded with the host town fund don't have any impact on the general fund that we're talking about. Let's see, the town hall parking, we'd like to defer that project, and we've discussed this with Bruce, and no big deal. And this was just the engineering and the planning of that. So we're just moving that project back for now. The Allenbrook Community Park, that was funded with general fund for $50,000, and that's just putting aside money for the potential build out. So we felt like that was something we would easily just defer and then look to fund that with the rec impact fees instead of using fund balance going forward. So both the park maintenance and the park maintenance budget, Todd just came up with an estimate, and he feels like he could decrease. He had an operating budget of 20, and he feels like he could take 10 away and still do what he needs to do for this year. And that was funded within the operating budget. And then Chief, so Ken, back when Ken was there, we went through his capital budgets. And so for his radio replacement, he felt like he has a $29,000 budget, and he felt like he could give up 20,000 of that and still have enough with his carryover balance and the 9,000 to do what he needs to do without hurting his program. And all of these were about discussing that we wouldn't be harming any programs at this time. And the same thing with the scuba equipment. Ken felt like he's got plenty of carryover money, and that if we canceled funding for 1 year, that would not hurt his program in any way at all. So those are the ones that, you know, we were kind of looking for your direction. Are you good with that? If we just say, okay, we're going to defer those or move them back in the FY22 capital budgets. And then the rest of the things are things that we know are happening, so we have to account for them. So the budget for FY21 only included 14, I'll say sergeant and officer positions. And there's actually 15 that are, how do I say that, Eric? Approved, and we've never been fully staffed, and the numbers have wavered. And Chief has finally been able to fully staff. He has one open position right now, but they've already got, you know, a line of candidates for that position, so it won't be long before they refill it.
Yeah, I would say, Shirley, that we had so much variance in staffing there when the operating budget was put together last year. We picked that a lower tier, but you know, trying to account for and be realistic what we're looking for numbers wise, we've made this adjustment as we project moving forward.
Yes, and then so there's an increase in wages, but it's also offset by, they have a sergeant position that's free, that has been unfilled. And of course, it's a higher paid position. So that helps offset some of the increase for the budget, the police officer staffing increases. The changes in the town manager office is just leaving Eric's old position unfilled for half a month. And then the difference between, the change in people who are sitting in the position.
And benefits accounted for as well.
Benefits accounted for as well. Yep. And then the library, Eric's had this conversation with Jane, and Jane's had it with the library trustees, is that there was a part-time position in the library, and that is on hold for now. And that is the plan for now. In the town clerk's office, we have been re-looking at the staffing of the clerks. There's Sarah, the full-time clerk, and there's also 2 full-time assistant clerks. And the workload is just not there for the 2 full-time assistant clerks. So we're looking to move that back to part-time, which it was through June 30th of 19. And that would be at the beginning of the year. And then just, Masonic rental, small thing. We don't plan to use it for the seniors this year, so we should save that. Lake Iroquois, nobody communicated with the town that the Williston share of the Lake Iroquois fee was increased, so we put that back in here because we know that it's going from $600 to $1,500, and we didn't have the $900 in the budget. And then the town band reviewed their budget, and they're able to give up like $925. So that got us to, I'll say, $475,000 of savings, and we have $86,000 we are still looking at. So I'll stop there for a minute if you have questions, and then we can talk about, just review some of the options for you to think about that Eric and I came up with.
Shirley, Jeff here. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
On the town clerk, it sounds like the assistant town clerk taking a full-time position, and I don't know what the right word is, decreasing it to a part-time position.
Yeah.
And I heard you say that the workload is just not there.
Right.
So does that mean somebody will see I shouldn't say will, that must mean somebody's going to see their hours reduced?
Yes.
We
actually it was full-time 40 hours. It's already been shifted down to 32 and a half hours. So a little history. So when the FY20 budget was created, Jeff, I think Deb's hope was that they were doing so many passports that position was really busy with passports. There, of course, is nobody coming in and no passport work. And therefore, there's just not work to do. So it's really hard to not have work for somebody. I mean, we give him other things that are not clerk work to have work to do. But there is just not the work to do. And so it's a little hard to continue to pay that person to be full-time and benefits eligible when we just can't support it.
Okay, I mean, I hope you don't take this personally, but that's just very disappointing to hear. And particularly the part where the part-time kicks them out of the benefits.
Yeah.
And I understand there's 2 assistant town clerks. Was this done to both positions or one position?
Just one position. The other position helps Sarah a lot with the issues, the task around balloting, but she does the recording. And so this is where I don't know everything here yet, Jeff, but you have to have some like internal controls around the reporting. So Jennifer does all the reporting, and she has been very busy with that workload.
So there's a clear differentiation in between the responsibilities of the 2 town clerks, assistant town clerks.
Yep,
Okay.
and the one who does the recording also, other than Sarah, also does work with the researchers who come in to help them with their questions as well. That's part of her
Yeah.
task as well, and they continue to have appointments and several people in every day.
Okay.
And I guess I would add, Jeff, too, this is the staffing model that the town clerk wants to move forward with for the department there that falls under her purview.
Yeah.
Okay. That's, yeah, I hadn't really considered that aspect of it. It is a separate office in a sense, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a comment, just to say, impressive what you have tried to do so far. And I fully recognize how difficult a situation this is, but definitely want to give you a hats off and just thank you for what you did.
You're welcome. It's a team effort, that's for sure.
Well done. It's not easy.
Yeah. So, were you gonna say something, Terry?
I was going to say the question really is, are we satisfied with what you have put forward? Or if we're not, what particular one is not?
Well, the one I focused on just a while ago doesn't sound like we have much control over.
Right.
No, other than, no, the other items, no, I have no comment on.
I think this is a product of measured reason. So I think it looks like it's going in the right direction to me, and I don't think I want to jump in and micromanage stuff that I don't know enough about.
I would expect we're going to see a revisit of this in another 3 months probably.
Well, Shirley, were you looking for input from us on the 5 items that you identified on pages 2 and 3?
So yeah, I was gonna go back to that. So these were, I mean, I think right now, Eric and my conversation has just been, okay, so we came up with some ideas to help fill that $86,000 shortfall we are looking for right now. So these were some ideas that we just laid out to you. I think I'll just talk about the first two, the Affordable Housing Fund and the Environmental Reserve Fund. Those would be something we'd normally transfer, operating cash to and fund those. And we're just going to hold that. We're not going to move forward with it. We're going to look at this again come January and see where we are. But these were some things that, those two things and the merit increase, we gave it out a little later in July. We did 1%. And so originally we were talking about maybe doing the other 1% in January, but if we hold off, you can see the impact of that. So, there were so few things we had left. And as I said, we haven't sat with other than the rec department because Todd's budget, so much of it is all programs and then the program expenses. I did sit with him and go through each of his line items, but we haven't done that with the other departments yet. The message has been spend what you need to run your programs, but also review your spending very carefully. And if you don't have to spend, don't spend.
Okay.
So these were just some thoughts we're laying out. We're not asking you to approve or disapprove any of them right now, but these were our thoughts about, okay, if we come January and we're looking at this again and we still have a hole, then at that point, we probably need to make some decisions.
Okay. So if you don't mind, I'm good with the first two. The third one, I was prepared to say, I don't like it. And the reason is because I'm sure there's a ton of staff who've been going above and beyond during COVID, and that should be recognized. But now I'm weighing that against somebody who I'm sure is a good employee, but they're now part-time and without benefits. So I have a hard time justifying it's okay to give some people additional money when somebody else is, hours were cut and benefits, at least during a period of time, were for lack of better words, taken away. So I don't know if that really helps. The fourth one, I'm good with. The fifth one, I'm pretty opposed to. Because that becomes, death of programs by 1,000 cuts, where the opposite approach, which is find a program that is important, but not as important as the other programs, and cut that program so that the other programs can continue to be good, efficient, productive programs. So hopefully that helps. I don't know.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jeff, for those comments. I've been in a situation before where we had a situation like this in another municipality, and we had all the senior staff, department heads together, and we had a target that we needed to find. Then by having that brainstorming session of everyone looking at their budget, we were able to come up with that number. So I think an exercise like that is valuable if we get in that situation, and it's not kind of as stern of a directive per se. It's a team effort to find that.
Sure. Yes. And I'm not, I know one of the things I've learned is if you can squeeze it, great. But if you can't, then find a program. It's going to hurt. Nobody's going to like it, but find a program you have to cut. And so the other programs can survive and be good program and continue to be good programs.
Yep.
Yeah. And with that, I'll shut up.
No, thank you. Thank you.
I should mention one other piece, and one of the major reasons we waited to do this, to bring this forward in October, was we had our first property tax payment due in September 15th this year, and we wanted to see where revenues landed after that. And our delinquency rate after the first tax payment was what we would expect in a prior year. So that was good news for that revenue stream. That helped us develop this model, which will. And I think after our next report for local option tax next quarter, you have 2 quarters worth of data there in this COVID time that helps us get a little more information there as well.
Hey, Eric, since you just mentioned the property tax, which was September 15th, and the next one piggybacks pretty quickly, what are your anticipatory thoughts on the delinquency rate?
And moving ahead, and Shirley, you might have gotten some more feedback from the notes that went out, but based on the first one, Gordon, I'm expecting probably something similar, but Shirley, you and Mary might have a little more insight there too on the receipts side.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I have a few dates where I printed out the delinquency, and I'm just going to talk about 2021. So this was September 21st. This was right after all the payments were processed, because those that are postmarked with the 15th, we still, according to policy, receipt them as being on time. So right after all the payments that we received on the 15th were posted, are the payment one, the past due was $361,000. That was September 21st. On September 24th, that number went from 361 down to 349. And on October 3rd, that number was 212,000. So, and those payments keep coming in. So it is in line with what we've seen before. But your question is a good question. What does that mean in terms of the November payment? And what I'll say is that we had many, many people who are so used to the August 15th due date. As soon as they got their tax bills, payments started coming in. So people are geared to those 3 dates. We had a couple people whose payments were late, and you may see them through the BCA that they had interest charged, and it was more than the $10 in our policy that we could waive. So, our only out is to ask them to just write a letter and explain and go through the BCA. But that policy, our payment policy, is something that I would like to review and update in terms of the amount. Like some of these were like $16, and with COVID going on, and I was like, it'd be nice if we could have just said, yeah, we can write that off. We got the payment the next day. There are issues, the unemployment issues and things. So it would be nice if we raised that, the amount that we are able to write off for interest a little bit higher, to just save everybody work of not going to the BCA, and we're not talking about many instances. So we're not talking big dollars here at all. So the few people that had a concern in total spent under $50. So does that help, Gordon?
Yeah, certainly it helps. I just, I guess as the old saying, time will tell.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Anything else in the document that Shirley has produced for us on this issue? Guess we'll move on then to the fiscal year 22 budget preliminary discussion, and Eric and Shirley are on this one too.
Yep, and I recognize it is getting a little late with these numbers, so I was hoping this evening to just kind of give a broad overview as some concepts here we've got to think about as the board considers FY22. We started the process internally. We've had capital budgets due to Shirley and myself earlier this month, and we started reviewing those this week. We'll have operating budgets. I've asked to get those in by the end of the month for us to start our internal review before we prepare a draft operating budget for the select board. We'll transmit over in November. But I was hoping this evening to just kind of raise some larger concepts we should be aware of here. And in your packet, you'll see I updated our budget indicators from last year. I changed a couple things in there with COVID, but it gives an idea of some data. The median income, unemployment, population, inflation rate. We'll be interested with our census data. I'm expecting Williston to be over the 10,000 mark when we get that report. So that'll be a milestone for the community here to be looking at. I guess what I'll share with the board here is you'll see these materials. There's a lot of information there to unpack and digest. And what we're looking for is, as we develop these first drafts with department heads, just I want to give them some overall general fiscal direction as they're thinking and developing their budgets here. So as we just talked about in the FY21 budget, we're projecting a $560,000 revenue deficit. I think it's probably a fairly safe bet to think when we're start FY22 next June, we're likely not going to realize all the revenue that we lost to get back to that same level in FY22. Time will tell. It's really hard to predict these things, but I think we should be thinking about that our revenue is not going to be back at the level we had pre-COVID right away. So we should be thinking about that as the board considers FY22 budget. So you'll see one thing we've looked at is kind of looking at a range, generally a 4 to 6% overall general fund expenditure reduction from where we were on our original FY21 budget. You will see, Shirley will touch on some of these details a little more, but another piece is thinking about commercial real estate valuation and the grand list. I've had some preliminary discussions with Town Assessor Bill Hinman, and we'll probably have them before the board in November. But there is a prospect, there's a possibility we could see a flat grand list next year, or even a decrease in the grand list, and how that's going to affect overall as we think about needing to raise funds through property taxes with a grand list that may not have a lot of changes to it, where we may need to look at more property tax revenue, where these other revenue sources are really a bit volatile. We will have more fund balance to take a look at. We'll have a better picture of that when the audit's complete in December or January. And we expect we can still use some fund balance as a source of revenue to offset tax increases. But I want to bring this to the board's attention now, kind of a macro level as we look at these, a lot of variables at play right here. And I'll turn over to Shirley. She had a couple points to touch on as well.
Yeah, so I'm on, I guess the next to the last page before the article. And I was just gonna, so this was what Eric and I were thinking that would be a good place to shoot for as we go through the first budget round is, so we're starting from that FY21 revised expense number of $11,111,000. and said, okay, what are our known? Eric told me today that the VSP dispatching is probably going to go away. So we may not actually have that increase in expenses. MVP, we've already got the information there. There's a increase in the deductible, and there's a 4.7% increase in the premium. So roughly calculated, that's about a $34,000 increase that we know of. Putting that forth, police department position officially in the budget is about 75,000 wages and benefits. The fire truck debt, that's just the increase. FY20, we're just going to have one interest payment. So that's 2 interest payments and a principal payment. So that's just the increase over what's in our FY20 budget. It was big enough that we wanted to have it reflected. And best guess right now is that COLA is 1.6%, maybe a little bit lower, but just for this purpose, I used 1.6%. So wage increase about 70,000. So, okay, we said it with what we know, we're looking at a budget of 11,000, like $400,000. Somewhere in that ballpark is what Eric and I will put together to present to the board, thinking that is probably a reasonable place to be. And just sort of wanted your thoughts about that.
And it is early to look at numbers at this level of detail, but I think we should be thinking about clawing back a little bit from our spending level in 21.
So let me just, Shirley, if you don't mind, make sure I understand that number correctly. The 11,413,000 will actually be a slight decrease from the fiscal year 21 budget.
Exactly. Yep.
So with cost of living at, I don't know what, somewhere between 1.6 and probably 2%, it's that's significant. I mean, that's a significant thing for you to be telling us right now that we're looking at a
cutting.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. I'm not disagreeing, and thank you for bringing it up early in the process. That's great. But this is going to be difficult.
It is. And it's only because we're concerned about the tax rate increase and keeping that at some manageable level with everything that's going on with folks financially.
Absolutely agree. This is going to be a time when I guess it's not the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but it is a time to be looking at our fund budget.
Yes. Yes.
I don't want to go any further than that, but yeah. Okay. All right.
I'm with you.
Yeah. We November and December is going to be tough.
Yes.
Okay.
And January. Yes.
Yes. True. Yes.
This is
can't
best,
say-
go ahead.
I just can't. I have trouble thinking a month in the future these days, let alone into next year.
Sometimes we have trouble keeping track of what day it is. So yeah. So this is the best guess at the moment, and we'll be discussing this in depth and the time to come.
Yeah, but I very much do appreciate the heads up early.
Oh, thank you. I'm hearing from the board tonight. I'll kind of pass on this message to department heads that we really want to be mindful of where our bottom lines come in each department wise, and we're not really looking to add a whole lot for next year. We just want to be able to kind of carry on here. And granted, we don't put a lot of extra inflation in our budget much at all. It's a very, very tight budget, I would say. So just I know some departments are thinking of enhancements. And it may be a year where we need to wait on that and just evaluate what our bottom lines are going to be.
Do you want to touch on the schedule for budget meetings?
Thanks, Terry. I've prepared, and these look like similar documents to everyone. I took what Rick's done in the past and just updated for this year. A couple minor changes on a couple orders on some evenings, but it's the same schedule the board had last year. I am also proposing that we wait on the enterprise funds till the springtime. We can wait on, like last year that we did, we can just focus on operating now if the board wants to go that direction. But looking for a consensus from the board if this schedule works. Open to make any changes as well, and I expect it to be all virtual this year, based on where we are right now.
Hearing no comments, so we'll plan on this. So that brings us to the municipal planning grant application. And Eric, can I talk a little bit about that?
I like hard copy, so it's digging through my pile of papers here. I found it. So I'm presenting this on behalf of Planning Department, and our town planner, Emily Heyman, put this together. It's a municipal planning grant. There's going to be an update to the village master plan, and part of that, the grant funding would be providing illustrations to go with this update throughout the plan. Planning Department would fund it's proposed to overfund the local match. They are looking this to be at FY22, drawing from there. And this is from a pretty standard line item for the Planning Department. And I evaluated our budgetary needs moving ahead and looking at this, and I recommend moving forward with it. I think it's a good project. I think we wouldn't be scaling back these funds to a scale where this wouldn't be obtainable for this level of match. I would say for the board that there is a timeline here, and the board is to approve this municipal planning grant tonight. I would ask that you electronically sign it tonight or first thing tomorrow morning, as the state would need this. They're telling me tomorrow. So I guess it's right up against their deadline.
Any questions for Eric on this before we have a motion?
The only question I have, and it doesn't have to do with the motion, any issues with the electronic signing? It looks like maybe Joy already signed it. And so I just want to make sure that maybe after the meeting, if I choose to sign it, I go and do that, and just trying to make sure that there are no problems with it.
As far as I know, it should work fine. Hopefully the technology cooperates. The state has recommended this as the option to use. So
okay, it just that
we're get 3 signatures to take if the board adopts this resolution.
We do a lot of things that work by e-sign, and sometimes it's smooth as a whistle, and other times it can be a little grumpy, might be a way to put it.
Let's hope on the whistle route.
I do, yeah.
So I'll be looking for a motion then.
I would move to approve the municipal planning grant resolution as presented for the Village Zoning District Bylaw Update Illustration Project.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are no negative votes. So we've taken care of that. We're on the state drinking water revolving loan fund agreement. And Eric, you're talking about that again.
And just, if you don't mind, before we start, I need to recluse. I'm happy to provide information if that's helpful, but I need to recluse myself from any discussion and
yes,
and certainly the vote.
Yep.
So yes, the board, you probably recall you approved this loan application back in August, and this is the step 2 loan application. This goes to the final design and engineering for the Lamplight Waterline project. And we submitted the application, and the application has been approved by the state and the Vermont Bond Bank. So this is the loan agreement. And this can eventually be rolled into the construction bond should that pass when we finance that. So I'd ask the board for to approve the agreement this evening, and then I can leave that for a hard signature above the mailboxes here in the town offices and in a couple places.
Any further questions for Eric on this? If not, I'm looking for a motion on this one as well.
I'd move to approve the loan agreement with the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank in the amount of $85,700 for final design and engineering of the Lamplight water line replacement project.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, and Jeff abstains. So we're on to the manager's report.
Thank you, Terry. A couple things I want to touch on briefly this evening as we wrap up. I wanted to highlight an update on our legal issues regarding the Bevins property. A few months back, I worked to have the town a petition for an estate to be opened, and that's proved to be valuable in moving this forward. The executor of the estate, an attorney, has helped move things along, and there was a preliminary injunction was granted by Chittenden Superior Court last month, basically upholding the items in the Williston Board of Health order from last year to move those along. I was updated by Health Officer Cindy Thurston that folks at the Bevins property, they have not moved forward with these required changes, but they are all planning to move out from the property. And it's my understanding that that should lead to resolution here and ultimately this property being sold at this time. So it's moving forward, I'll say, to resolve this issue. Has been going on for quite a bit, and I'll have a report further once we have more definitive update there, but that's where that stands right now for the Board of Health. And I also want to recognize our Assistant Fire Chief, Doug Holbert, submitted his resignation early September to Chief Morton. He served for over 35 years, and he felt it was the right time for him to move on. He thanked Chief Collette. He let him know that it was other commitments he has. It was the right time for him to transition out of the department. I just want to recognize his over 35 years of serving the community at Williston Fire, and I know the department's looking to have something to recognize him as well. So I want to thank Assistant Chief Holbert. We're looking to have the Select Board retreat on Monday, October 26th. Thoughts to do that from 5:30 to 7 before our public information session on the Lamplight bond note. I've heard back from a couple Select Board members. If you haven't gotten back to me yet, if you could let me know if you're available that date so we can begin the planning for that retreat. And then another scheduling note is our first November meeting is scheduled for the 3rd, election night. Board had consensus to move that a couple months ago, so we should determine a date that we're going to meet, potentially the 4th or the 5th that week. I can send out something over email to gauge availability from board members.
Think about whether or not we'd like to meet on the a Wednesday night of that week or the following week and on Tuesday, but that would put us meeting in 2 weeks in a row in November.
I like the Wednesday night idea versus 2 weeks in a row.
I do.
We'll just make sure you're available. Eric will put out the questionnaire for you.
Okay.
And this is not my written report, but we've been, the town clerk's office, with help from Public Works, installed our new ballot drop box in the back parking lot. It's been installed just over a week, and latest number from town clerk Sarah Mason is we've had 2,000 ballots returned, which is about 25% of our checklist, according to the clerk's office. So they've been quite busy. It's proved to be highly used already.
Yeah, I'm very impressed, with the concept, the way it looks. You just drive next to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
roll down your window, push the button that electronically puts down your window and drop it in. It's great. Yeah, nice job to everyone involved.
It's a whole new meaning to stuffing the ballot box.
I will say for folks listening at home, the clerk's office is emptying it multiple times a day to make sure those ballots get brought inside as soon as possible.
Plus weekends. I was amazed. I was there on Sunday picking up my select board packet, and I walk in and music's blaring in the town office. It's like, what's going on? And it was because Sarah was there dealing with ballots.
She was there on Saturday too,
Yeah.
It's
with music
amazing.
blaring.
And one other thing I'll touch on this evening is Shirley alluded to this, but police dispatch. We had continued conversations with Vermont State Police, and we were able to determine that our assessment call number they used in 2018 was about 55% higher than what was actual calls that year. Thanks to some good work by Sergeant Eric Shepard and the police to take a really close look at those numbers. Our understanding is the state police will use that number in our assessment, which I expect to be between $20,000 and $25,000. But in other news in the State House, Bill S-124 that is on the governor's desk right now would further delay any assessments for state police at least another year. So we'll wait to see what happens there, but there's a good chance our conversation and thought on that over the last month, we will be able to eliminate that expense to 22 at least, which is helpful. And then we had grant funding. There's a lot of local opportunity through the CARES Act for grant funding, and we've been awarded over $250,000, and we've been able to find some projects here to use those funds for, including $30,000 towards some ventilation equipment, both mobile and increased HEPA filters for all our buildings, improvements in the police department officers' room to create better social distancing for officers while they're working, and about $70,000 for communications equipment for emergency operations. And this is all CARES money. We need to expend the funds. It's reimbursement money. We need to expend those funds by early December, and then we'll be reimbursed in full for them. And thanks to Shirley for her hard work on this and adding some amendments as we heard from other towns what they were doing to take advantage of those funds.
Yeah, that came from the PD as well. Conversations among those police officers sometimes are invaluable. So yeah, so this is just an addition to the numbers that I reported previously, where I said we had been approved and have been approved for 80,000, and we have already been approved for the change up to 252,000. I mean, it was next day approval, which really surprised me. So they still had money to give out, so we'll take it.
You bet.
Yeah.
That's all I have for my report this evening.
Thank you, Eric. Next on the agenda is the other business, and we do have a catering permit to look at.
And I have the state permit, which has a little more information in front of me. This is an event at the Isham Family Farm. It's a corporate family fall fest, a private family event for Champlain Investment Partners. There's going to be a lunch catered by Black Diamond Barbecue out of Morrisville, and they're planning to serve alcohol in 8, 12, and 16 ounce cans. It would be Sunday, the 18th of October from noon to 4. We have no issue with this at the Isham property. We've had a good experience there with events they've had catered in the past. So staff recommends the board's approval.
Any questions for Eric? If not, I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
And seconded by Ted. With a point of the finger. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've done it. Okay. Is there any other business we need to talk about tonight? If not, I have my gavel in hand. We're adjourned. Thank you all.
Everybody.
Yep. Good
Thanks,
night,
everyone. Have a good night.